Hey guys, what's up? I'm CJ and welcome back to my galaxy. Today we are talking about the Hunger Games, and as you can see by the title, we are discussing what if Lenore Dove never ate those gumdrops. And I know a lot of people are really gonna hate me probably for this video because it is literally giving us a what if scenario of something that would change a lot of the plot of the Hunger Games, especially like Sunrise on the Reaping and the original trilogy, and it would affect a lot of characters around them. So we're going to discuss everything and all the consequences of Lenore Dove not eating the gumdrops, but in order to discuss the consequences, we first have to get into how Lenore Dove would survive eating the gumdrops and what would have to happen in order for her to not do that. So we know that Haymitch actually fed Lenore Dove these gumdrops. It wasn't his fault, the death wasn't his fault, but he does blame himself. The gumdrops were planted by President Snow, and they were planted out in the garden because out in the meadow, because he knew that Haymitch had gumdrops for Lenore Dove, and that was this thing that she had as a gift. In Sunrise on the Reaping, Haymitch feeds Lenore Dove the gumdrop and they have a bit of a conversation, and Lenore Dove essentially reveals that the gumdrops he gave her on the reaping day was actually still under her pillow at home, and that she said she could eat the ones that are under her pillow. She'd been saving them, and he realizes this actually isn't the same gumdrop packet that she'd been hiding out in the meadow. It was planted there, and he looks down and it's red, bright red with poison gumdrops. Lenore Dove had been held captive by the peacekeepers in their base for a number of days and hadn't eaten for like 3 days, so there was no way for her to throw up the gumdrops at that point. So Haymitch blames himself, and he goes through a lot of what if scenarios in his head, like what if I had looked down in time, what if I had not fed her the gumdrop, what if I knew, he blames himself for killing her, which, like I said, not his fault. But what I want to do is essentially discuss the what if scenario of Haymitch. Had he looked down in time and seen that these gumdrops were bright red with poison, he would have avoided killing Lenore Dove. So for this what if scenario, let's assume Haymitch looks down in time and realizes there's something wrong with these gumdrops. These aren't the ones that I gave Lenore Dove. And they throw out the gumdrop packet, and they're on high alert that Lenore Dove is trying to, Snow is trying to kill Lenore Dove in the same way that Haymitch's family was killed. So they're now aware of this plot to kill Lenore Dove and all of Haymitch's loved ones. The only thing with this is that Snow is hell-bent on destroying Haymitch and all of the covey. So yeah, Haymitch saves Lenore Dove, and he looks down in time to see the gumdrops are bright red, doesn't feed Lenore Dove gumdrops, therefore she does not get poisoned, but obviously there are consequences to Lenore Dove surviving. So what are these consequences, and how do they lead us all the way to 25 years later? Snow is trying to kill all of the covey, including Lenore Dove, especially since she is so closely related to Haymitch. So Snow is taking every opportunity to make sure Lenore Dove dies, and to kill her, to poison her, because that is his weapon of choice. The gumdrops don't work. He tries another method of poison. Maybe he tries to start a house fire again, like the way he did with Haymitch's family. He's taking just every single opportunity he can to kill her in the next year leading after the 50th Hunger Games. But of course, Haymitch and Lenore Dove now know about this plot, and Haymitch would be on high alert at all times, so he would likely move Lenore Dove into the Victor's village with him, or at least attempt at doing that, to Tam Amber's and Clark Carmine's dismay. I am sure that they very much do protest against Haymitch moving Lenore Dove in with him. It would be very likely that Lenore Dove would not be allowed to be around Haymitch because he's causing trouble. So in order to keep Lenore Dove alive, Tam Amber and Clark Carmine are watching her very closely around the meadow area in the scene. Haymitch is in the Victor's village, and he's still very much paying attention to what's going on, probably visiting Lenore Dove at all hours of the day. He doesn't have school, he doesn't have to work, he has all this free time. And because he has all this free time and he's trying to watch Lenore Dove and trying to make sure she doesn't die, he also doesn't become an alcoholic. He's completely sober, because what sends him over the edge after his family dies, he's obviously devastated and tries to rescue them in the burning house, but he is brightened up, like his mood brightens up when he sees Lenore Dove, because at least he has Lenore Dove, right? So he doesn't like completely get sent over the edge until Lenore Dove dies and is poisoned. As long as Lenore Dove is alive and he needs to keep her alive from Snow trying to kill her, then he's not going to become an alcoholic. He's not going to go on any drugs. Like Astrid isn't going to give him the drugs. I don't remember, was it morphling that she gave him, or some sort of like, oh no, like sleep syrup is what she gave him, and he's not going to be addicted to sleep syrup and therefore go on to alcohol later on. He's not going to do any of that. So in this version of Lenore Dove not dying and not being poisoned, Haymitch is not an alcoholic. So I see the next 25 years going one of two ways. Clark Carmine and Tam Amber make a plan to escape District 12 with Lenore Dove in order to keep her safe. Even though they don't want her around Haymitch, they obviously want Lenore Dove to survive. It's just the fact that they are kind of misdirected in the sense of what would keep her alive, because they think that Haymitch is the problem, when in reality we know it's the capital and it's Snow trying to kill all of the Covey. The trio would escape to the north where the Covey used to perform. They would just herded into District 12 because that's where they were at the time. There they would potentially find either District 13, or they would escape to another country outside of Pan or an existing town outside of Pan. Haymitch obviously is left behind. Tam Amber and Clark Carmine do not want him around Lenore Dove, so he is stuck in the Victor's village on his own. He largely blames himself that she had to escape, and he is always, we know in like Sunrise on the Reaping, he mentions always worrying that Lenore Dove will run away without him and he will never see her again. So that would essentially happen. And then the next 25 years would be essentially the same as the original trilogy. The events would play out the same. He would just have this different kind of hope that he would see Lenore Dove again once Pan is falls, or the capital falls. And then in the epilogue, we would see Haymitch actually reuniting with Lenore Dove at the end. They would reunite in life instead of death, which is what the reality is in Sunrise on the Reaping. All the events would play out differently in the second way, which I think is more likely the second way, and we're gonna like discuss the further consequences of this second idea in this video, in the rest of this video. Seeing Haymitch and the way that his family was killed, and that Haymitch is trying to keep Lenore Dove alive, Lenore Dove would be fueled by rage and this sense of justice that she has throughout Sunrise on the Reaping, and will want to take down the capital even more. I imagine that Haymitch would tell Lenore Dove to run, and that they'd go together to escape District 12 in the same way that, this is Luna, by the way, just in the corner of my video. And in the same way that Katniss suggests running at the end of Catching Fire, and she's trying to convince like Peter, Gale, Haymitch, all that to escape District 12, to run. But we know that Lenore Dove has this fighting spirit, and instead of agreeing to run with Haymitch, she stays. In the same way that Gale sees the unrest or hears about the unrest in the other districts from Katniss, and he chooses to stay to fight. And Lenore Dove has that kind of personality that she decides to stay and fight instead of running away from the problems. She wants to prevent the sun rising on the Reaping. She wants to make sure she can help and make sure she liberates Pan from the capital's oppression. Since Lenore Dove is staying, Haymitch obviously has to stay too. And then we go into Snow trying to kill Lenore Dove in every possible way. And what's the easiest way to kill Lenore Dove? Reap her in the 51st Hunger Games. Haymitch would go feral. I know that for a fact. Haymitch would lose his mind. It's like Peter, not being able to be in the arena with Katniss. He'd literally lose his mind. So Haymitch's girlfriend going into that arena, no way. And we know from the Quarter Quell, Haymitch has already tried his stunt of blowing up the arena or destroying the barrier, the force field around the arena. That stunt would not be able to be repeated. They'd have higher security measures. So getting Lenore Dove out of this arena is going to be 10 times harder. And on top of that, we know with Ampert that the Mutts actually can target specific tributes and kill them like in an instant and in really brutal ways. So I would assume just based on like DNA, so all they need is like Lenore Dove's DNA right before she goes into the arena, and all of a sudden she's being targeted by mutts and making sure she dies in that arena. So because this video is supposed to be optimistic in a way and making sure that Lenore Dove doesn't die, I want to go through how we would get Lenore Dove out of the arena. We as in us, because we're right there with Haymitch, obviously, you know, we're outside, we're mentors. If Lenore Dove didn't eat those gumdrops in the first place, it would afford Haymitch almost more luck than he was given in Sunrise and the Reaping. We know that Plutarch says we just need someone luckier, and we need someone who's just in the right place in the right time. Haymitch wasn't like that in the novel, in his story, but Lenore Dove is alive, and essentially that makes him and Lenore Dove almost like Katniss and Peter. Lenore Dove is in this impossible situation that Peter ends up in when he's hijacked in Mockingjay. So Katniss and Haymitch kind of parallel each other in that sense. Haymitch would insist that they attempt another breakout of the arena in the same way that they did in his games. He would be in contact with Beetee, Wiress, Mags, except they've been tortured and they don't necessarily have the same resources as the year before. So it'd be difficult, but it wouldn't be impossible to break Lenore Dove out of the arena, especially that she knows that what Haymitch tried to do. We don't know, in this case, we don't know what the 51st Hunger Games arena looked like. We don't know in what way she could have broken the force field or broken the generator, and what kind of security would be in that. So you have to kind of like suspend your disbelief in the way that Haymitch finds some sort of way to interact with Beetee, and Beetee uses his brain to come up with a plan, and that they recruit enough people and recruit Lenore Dove into trying to break the force field again. And we know a lot of the time, people have been speculating since Sunrise and the Reaping came out, that there were multiple attempts at getting people out, like breaking the force field. We can see in Annie Crester's year that the dam broke, and that very possibly could have been them breaking the arena in the same way that Haymitch flooded the like generator area and underneath the arena. A lot of people also speculate that Thresh was a part of the plot to break the arena as well, and that's like a whole different topic that we should discuss, like Thresh being one of those. But people have speculated that there were multiple attempts, so it's not out of the question that they would attempt again the next year, and honestly every year, to try and get people out. It's not impossible to pull another stunt with Lenore Dove that they did with Haymitch, and to make sure that she ends up being in like this big alliance. They try again that year with like the just multiple districts in like one massive alliance against the career tributes. Lenore Dove is a fighter, and she's trying to get out of that arena and trying to stick it to Snow and tell him that you can't kill me. And I imagine that she would make it out alive. I think for the sake of this video, we should just like make her survive, because I think that there are a lot of different consequences seeing her survive for the next 25 years on the rebellion, and how that would look different. Lenore Dove, obviously a lot smarter than Haymitch. Haymitch even himself says that at the beginning of Sunrise and the Reaping. So she breaks out of the arena. She breaks the force field in the arena, they break out. So what's different from the third quarter quell to the 51st Hunger Games / like the second quarter quell, compared to like socially, like what would the rebellion look like? How would it look? And I think that it would start a lot sooner because of Lenore Dove. So like she has that really fiery spirit in order to break out, and like wanting to kill Snow because of the way that she was treated, the way that he treated Haymitch. But you have to question, is the rebellion already in contact with District 13? That was one of the biggest things, was that they grabbed a bunch of victors and went into hiding into District 13. They're underground, very difficult to bomb, very difficult to get to. So District 13 helped enormously with the rebellion. It's just that they had to come in at the right time. I think that it's quite possible that District 13 is in contact with the rebellion and the districts at this point. Since we know that Katniss and Peter weren't aware of District 13, it's likely that the Haymitch wouldn't have known either if there were people like Plutarch who were in contact with District 13. But there are also a number of different things that if Lenore Dove were to win the 51st Hunger Games and to break out like District 13, they're ready to go into hiding into District 13. That doesn't necessarily mean that a rebellion would start at that point. point. We know that the districts have the same amount of unrest that they have by the time of the 74th Hunger Games, because there's like a massive amount of high security. Like, it's a quarter quell. They're like trying to quell something for a reason, that there is definitely unrest there. Like, they kill Woodbine Chance on sight. As soon as he starts running, they don't try to capture him or anything. He's shot. He's killed immediately. Why else would they have that like shoot on sight attitude if it weren't for the fact that they were scared of the districts and scared of what the districts were actually capable of? So yeah, there's like unrest in all 12 districts. 13 is in contact with the rebellion. Plutarch is on their side, and Lenore Dove is winning the 51st Hunger Games. She's breaking the force field in the same way that Haymitch did, in the same way they do 25 years later in the Quarter Quell in the timeline that we know. But there's one big issue here. The capital still sees the tributes as animals. We know that the capital is not on the district's side. They could care less about the districts, these animals going into the games to make sure that they remain oppressed, they make sure that they understand their place in Panem. The capital is this wealthy district, this wealthy city that just, they don't care. They just really don't care enough to be a part of a rebellion. Yeah, there are people like Plutarch here and there who want that freedom, but they're like wealthy and they have like freedom in a sense. It's just not real freedom. There is not a full amount of unity between the capital and the districts for a full-blown rebellion at this point. And that's probably the biggest issue, is that Lenore Dove is alive, Haymitch is alive, and now they're victors. They're stuck because they tried the rebellion and it like got almost a bit further than Haymitch did the previous year, but it still can't be a full-blown rebellion yet. So we essentially end the 51st Hunger Games with a victor from District 12, and after the Quarter Quell we have Haymitch, a victor from District 12 as well. So there's a Covey winner. There is Haymitch, who is causing a lot of trouble for Snow, and Lenore Dove, she's probably not going to give up really causing trouble for the whole of the capital and the oppression, and she's got a really fiery attitude that's really going to kill both her and Haymitch. So what happens for the next 25 years if they've caused this much trouble for Snow, but they still haven't like incited a real full-blown rebellion? We know that Lenore Dove definitely gonna be a whole thorn in Snow's side for the next 25 years. But I almost imagine her as a really beloved victor, in the same way that Lucy Gray would have been had she not like disappeared or like been killed by Snow. And Lenore Dove maybe would even perform maybe for the capital, and she'd have this like talent and this like charisma that the capital absolutely loved. So she'd definitely contribute to she'd contribute to the victors being seen more as human, and she'd contribute in that way to the rebellion and the capital and district unity coming together eventually within the next 25 years. But what would definitely happen is that Snow would come after the Covey that he can kill, which is Clark Carmine and Tam Amber. They're definitely killed at this point in the same way that Haymitch's family is. And then obviously, as Katniss says in the original trilogy, any kids that her and Peter would have would be reaped, because the reapings have been known to be rigged, or like what they assume is rigged, in order to reap other victors' children. Especially, like, we know Ampert was also reaped, Beatty's child, and we assume Beatty doesn't have a wife or a kid. Like, his wife is pregnant at the end of Sunrise on the Reaping, and there's no mention of a wife or a kid in the original trilogy. So I would assume that his other kid was likely reaped as well. So Haymitch and Lenore Dove's kids definitely reaped into the Hunger Games, very likely killed, and whether or not they'd survive, I almost doubt that they would survive, just because Ampert was killed so brutally, and like the child of true victors who caused so many issues, those kids are dead. I'm sorry to break the news to you. Haymitch and Lenore Dove are definitely losing their children. Haymitch and Lenore Dove would be similar to Beatty, really hell-bent on trying to figure out a way to destroy the arena and incite a rebellion in some way. Lenore Dove, I imagine, would have a lot more hope than Haymitch. I still think Haymitch would be very much sober. He wants his head screwed on. He's learning and growing from Lenore Dove. is a lot smarter than him, but I'm sure that eventually that he does pick up on things here and there, that he does become smarter and a lot less, I guess, impulsive and a lot less of a rascal like he is in Sunrise on the Reaping. District 12 would probably not have a winner in the next 25 years, and we'll talk about Katniss and Peter in a second, but I know that like Snow would definitely come after anyone, like absolutely anyone that Haymitch and Lenore Dove are close to after the coffee. He wants to make sure everyone's like definitely dead and not making sure that there's not going to be another victor to cause him issues from District 12. Haymitch would tell Lenore Dove maybe it's safer for us to not contact anyone, to isolate ourselves in the victor's village. Lenore Dove, I doubt she'd have any of that. Like it's going against the capital to interact and socialize with people, so she would do that. She would talk to Burdock, she would talk to Astrid, and literally everyone. She'd still be social and would be close with people, because that's what creates community, and the equal oppression that they're all experiencing would incite the rebellion further and create more unrest. Lenore Dove, like I said, a relentless thorn in Snow's side. And if Lenore Dove is talking to everyone, like how is Snow supposed to kill all of District 12? Like it would look weird, and it would start like a lot of political unrest if he would just to randomly go and bomb District 12. They definitely have a lot more security in District 12, and I imagine that, and you'd probably think like Katniss and Burdock wouldn't be able to go outside and outside of District 12 and hunt and whatever, things like that. It'd be difficult for District 12, but as the 25 years pass, they would probably like lift those security measures eventually, just because like as time goes on and nothing happens, in the same way that Snow wouldn't allow another District 12 victor after the Lucy Gray, and then he, like time passes and he slips up and another, in the 50th Hunger Games, Haymitch wins, and then in the next 25 years Katniss and Peter wins. Like District 12 is always causing issues, but he like drops the ball a couple of times because he becomes like calm and he stops paying attention. So eventually the security would fall and Snow would be like, no one's coming out of there, no one's, like District 12 is like a weak little district, so it would eventually be okay for them to survive. And I imagine that District 12 would be relatively the same 25 years later. It's just taking a little bit longer, and maybe the unrest looks a little bit different, maybe District 12 looks a little bit different, but it's mostly the same. Lenore Dove is just interacting with people, Haymitch is sober, and they're all like still have these relationships. Burdock and Astrid would probably still be talking to Haymitch and Lenore Dove, and like Katniss knows Haymitch. So that by the time Katniss is reaped into the Hunger Games, she knows Haymitch and Lenore Dove, and she in some capacity would likely be able to trust them maybe a little bit more than she does in the original trilogy and in the timeline that we know is reality. I would say that the 74th Hunger Games also turns out relatively the same. It's just that Lenore Dove has this really hopeful, positive attitude in going into the games, that she's trying to make her tributes win and become victors. Her and Haymitch have just been waiting around in the same way that Plutarch did for the original trilogy for someone to spark that rebellion. It's just that Lenore Dove knows what she's doing, and she's been waiting for this exact moment to make sure that the capital understands and is like united with the districts. In fact, I would even say that she sees Peter and the potential in Peter, because if Haymitch saw the potential in Peter, then Lenore Dove of course would see that and be able to coach Peter and Katniss into this rebellious nature. I would say that Lenore Dove is essentially the face at this point of District 12, and she's very well known. She's known by the capital, she's known by like people in the District 12, like Katniss and Peter. She's keeping everyone hopeful, and in the way that she's causing trouble for Snow. I also feel like the 74th Hunger Games would play out relatively the same, because Katniss is the main character, not because she was just there is plot armor on her because she's the main character, but she's the main character because she won. Like in every world, she has the potential to win because the arena happened to be in her favor. She had Peter, who was like related to her in that way. They knew each other, and then she obviously had the connection to Haymitch, and then she'd have the connection to Lenore Dove as well. Katniss has that ability to fight and bring hope that Lenore Dove had as well, But Katniss and Peter, so both surviving the games, would be like the tipping point to the rebellion. So Katniss and Peter are still the face of the rebellion. However, when it comes to the Court of Quell, Lenore Dove and Haymitch are reaped. And I think that's because Snow is paying attention to killing the Covey in Lenore Dove rather than paying attention to Katniss and Peter. So that would mean that he's still very, very hyper-focused on the Covey and making sure that District 12 dies with the rebellion. So instead of his focus being on Katniss, his focus is on Lenore Dove. In that way, the events of Catching Fire would be, and Mockingjay would be largely the same. Katniss and Peter are the faces of the rebellion. Snow is focused on Lenore Dove and killing her instead. So they're taken to District 13 and the victors are saved, but the thing is, it wouldn't go as differently as, or the same as Peter being captured by the Capitol and Katniss being captured by District 13, because Haymitch and Lenore Dove both know about the plot instead. So they're all able to remove their trackers in time. They don't get captured by the Capitol, and that would give more strength to the rebellion. And honestly, if anything, it would last like a smaller amount of time, because the rebellion's been going on for the past 25 years. Like, it's something that Lenore Dove wouldn't allow to die. That hope is in Lenore Dove, and the districts, they have that hope and make sure, and it's just ensured by Lenore Dove. In fact, Peter would be moved to District 13. Peter would be he wouldn't be hijacked because he was a mentor, and Plutarch was able to get them both out in time, in the same way that he would have gotten Haymitch out and into District 13. In fact, with Lenore Dove's and Haymitch's experience, it would probably play out even better because they know what's happening, and Snow, so hyper focused on Lenore Dove and killing her, he would miss out on the rebellion plot. He wouldn't see it at all. So as Katniss and Peter are the face of the rebellion, I think that Lenore Dove would be a close motherly figure for Katniss and Peter, in replacement of Astrid being like very gone and depressed since Burdock was killed in the mining accident. She would coach Katniss and Peter throughout the rebellion, all the propos, and it'd be great. It'd be pretty much the same, but they just have that extra support, and the rebellion it doesn't last as long. Post-war, Haymitch and Lenore Dove would have their happily ever after, even though they didn't have, like, they had all their kids reaped. They would still have that pain, but they would still be able to be together and, like, be together in life instead of death. And Haymitch would be alive to see Katniss and Peter's kids because he's sober. And we have suspicions in Sunrise on the Reaping he dies before seeing them because he like destroyed his organs being an alcoholic. But him and Lenore Dove, like, they're healthy-ish, I would assume. And they're able to be alive to see their family grow. And Katniss and Peter would act as those kids that they weren't able to see survive the reapings. Lenore Dove surviving and not eating those gumdrops means the hope she brings to the narrative also survives. And obviously it drives Snow slowly insane. That's why he reaps their kids and they have to mentor their own kids. But it would definitely drive Snow insane for a Covey member to survive, and he can't do much about it. But that is my what if scenario today, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. I definitely enjoyed planning it. It took me like 3 days to plan, and I've been recording for over 40 minutes. So it's been ages. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please like and subscribe, and obviously comment down below what your thoughts are on this video. And what do you think would happen if Lenore Dove didn't eat those gumdrops? Once again, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, but I've been CJ, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!